Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. We are now live on Facebook, and we got folks coming in. Happy Juneteenth. Bismillah. Let's go ahead and get started, Suraya. And folks will just file in. Hold on, let me just do one more thing.
You're still on mute.
Thanks for that. Welcome once again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Demi Fozia, and we'll go ahead and get started now. Hang on. All right, cool. That's working. All right, Assalamu alaikum again. My name is Demi Fozia, and I'm the founder and executive director of the AFIA Project. Just a little bit about our organization. We are a wellness organization aimed at addressing health disparities in the Black community through public health programming and through providing scholastic achievement opportunities to our students. We operate primarily out of Prince George's County, in Maryland, and we serve the DC, Maryland, Virginia, the DMV metro area, but our reach spans beyond the DMV area, definitely. Today, we'll be discussing the significance of this day of celebration, Emancipation Day, Jubilee Day, Juneteenth. This discussion will be led by Suraya Mahmood. I hope to learn about the modern day significance of the celebration to the Black community and ways that we can honor our historical past and modern day America. By way of introduction, Suraya Mahmood is from Brooklyn, New York. She is a senior at the University of Maryland, majoring in family sciences. Her major has allowed her to further understand understand family dynamics, relationships, and provide real-life solutions to family problems. Her career goals include becoming a project manager, developing social programs. She enjoys spending time with her loving husband, her four children, who serve as motivation and inspiration for the completion of her studies. In her spare time, Suraya loves to entertain and cook for her family and friends. And let me tell you, Suraya can throw down in the kitchen. She can bake her hiney off. I love her bacon, mashallah. All right, without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Suraya. So go ahead, take it away.
Good afternoon. My name is Suraya Mahmood. Happy Jubilee on the day of national recognition of Juneteenth. Today, I would like to share the legacy of American history, the legacy of American descendant of slavery, and that is a history that is woven into the very living memory of this country. So I'm going to share now for the presentation. I think you have to give me access. Okay, there we go. Okay. America has a conflicting narrative that I would like to highlight, and starting with the American celebrational divide. Beginning with the 4th of July, the American descendants refer to this also as the 4th of July. It was started on, excuse me. The United States was founded on July 4th, 1776, with the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the separation of Great Britain. Juneteenth was created or started, for example, after slavery in Galveston, Texas, where the emancipation was not discovered until June 19th, 1864. I would like to present to you a clip of Frederick Douglass, a speech he gave in 52, about Juneteenth, or June 4th, excuse me, July 4th.
Okay.
Oh my God, you can't see the picture.
Yeah, just next slide. Yeah, there you go. Oh, one back. Back one more.
I'm trying.
So no, go backwards.
No, it's coming. It's the next one. Isn't it?
No, it's previous to that. Yeah.
It's moving too slow. There you go.
There you go.
There you
All
go.
right. So I'll go ahead and play it now.
Mr. President, friends and fellow citizens, he who could address this audience without a quailing sensation has stronger nerves than I have. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before an assembly more shrinkingly, nor with greater distrust of my ability than I do this day. A feeling has crept over me quite unfavorably to the exercise of my limited powers of speech. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and the natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God both for your sake and ours that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and his crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty in which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and quality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despots of the old world. Travel through South America, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival.
Yeah, that's it. Go back to you, Suraya.
Okay. Okay, so this speech was given before the Civil War, and the Civil War started in 1862. I would like to give note, though, that a lot of people, state or make Abraham Lincoln as the person who emancipated and pretty much freed the slaves. But what most people are not aware of is that in a letter to an editor of a newspaper by the name of Harrison Greenlee, he stated very clearly that if he could maintain slavery or freed slaves, he didn't care as long as he preserved the Union. But going on, the Emancipation was signed in 1863 by President Lincoln, basically freeing the slaves. However, in Galveston, Texas, Union soldiers led by General Jordan Ringer announced the abolition of slavery in Texas 2.5 years after Lincoln's emancipation, giving way to Freedom Day, which is Juneteenth. So I will also like to segue into another clip before I get to this picture. And this narrative is done about Laura Smalley. And pretty much in this clip, it talks about the experiences that African Americans have during slavery, just things that they will go through. For example, if they wanted to create more slaves, they would put a very strong Black male and strong looking Black woman, and they would just put them up in a hut somewhere and, expect them to produce, or just different things in terms of when they would run away. And then leading into this clip, she finally talks about when they are finally made aware of their liberation. So you could play that clip, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, can you remember how what happened when they set you free? Do you remember you remember how the old master acted when they?
No, so I can't remember that, can't remember that. But I remember, the time they give them a big dinner, on the 19th.
Is that right?
On the 19th, that's called, they said they give them a big dinner on the 19th. But now we didn't know. I'll tell you, I don't know how the other side of the folks feeding. We didn't know. They just thought, was just feeding us, just had a long table. And just had just little everything you want to eat, and drink, Now they said that was on the 19th. And everything you want to eat and drink. Well, see, I didn't know what that was for. I just, it wasn't wise like children is now. Anything go up now, a child 6, 7 years old can tell you.
That's right.
Yes, it wasn't wise. That's what they done. Give us a big dinner, Mr. Benjamin.
Okay, so pretty much that's how people in Galveston, Texas were informed of their emancipation. And ever since that day, African Americans have been celebrating and doing enactments. And that's what you see in this picture here is Black men in the 1800s celebrating Juneteenth. In the following picture, hopefully it comes up. Let me see. No. One more. For whatever reason, my system's slow. There we go. In the second picture, you have another family in the 1900s who are celebrating. And then the following picture is last year's celebration when it was made a national holiday. And then in this last picture, particularly, I want to give focus to the man in the middle. His name is Amos Harvey. He was born in 1847 in Oklahoma, and he traveled all the way out here on the basically East Coast, and he was a part of the Civil War. And that is my great-grandfather, and that is a part of my history in this country. And I would like to open the floor for anyone else who would like to share or state if that they have any history connected to the emancipation of African Americans. I think that's it. And that's all. Anyone else? Anyone have any questions or things that they would like to express?
Thank you so much for that, Suraya. Go ahead and stop sharing so then we can have a more interactive discussion. So as Suraya mentioned, she shared just now, no, you can get out of the slide completely. She's mentioned the picture of her family. Mashallah, it's really nice to see that she can actually trace her ancestry to her great-great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War to help free enslaved individuals in America at that time. So, and I know Suraya has also done like ancestry where you've actually traced your lineage all the way back to the continent. And I'd be interested in hearing more about that. But has anyone else done a similar tracing, just looking back to see where your ancestors fit into the bigger narrative? Oh,
Assalamu alaikum. I have traced my maternal side and paternal lines, but particularly of interest is my maternal line, which I use census records to trace my grandmother's side, and my grandparents were from South Carolina. And growing up, I did not get a lot of information about my grandmother, and she passed away when I was about 13. And so I used the census records to learn more about my grandmother. I learned that she had 13 other siblings and that she was one of 2 sets of twins. I didn't know there were 2 sets. I had only known my grandmother was a twin. And I know that my grandmother's parents were also born in South Carolina about 5 years or so after emancipation, and which puts their parents as being enslaved. So that was another connection I made. And then what I did is I researched different websites in terms of going back even further to find out the African heritage. And I used African DNA or African ancestry because it has like the largest records of persons of African descent. And then I traced my maternal line to Cameroon and the tribe, Bamileke tribe. And they said like the percentage was like it was a very high percentage, like over 90-something% match in terms of my maternal side's lineage to Cameroon. So for me, that was a big deal as well in terms of the connection to the continent, and that it's like, you're of African descent, but when people would ask you, but where are you from? And if you're African American and you don't know exactly the country where your ancestors have come from. So for me, that was a big deal to learn that there was a woman that was taken from Cameroon, from the Bamileke tribe, and went through the Middle Passage and landed in South Carolina. And that woman, I'm her ancestor, she is my ancestor. And to know that she went through that and her ordeals, it made things even more real for me. But it also gave me, I don't want to say pride, I don't know if that's the word, but it showed me the strength of my ancestors and my heritage and my legacy.
Wow, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's
I can add
huge.
on to that. Like, I love how
Yeah.
you express that. And then it's very interesting just going back into the whole legacy of what this day has meant for us in terms of giving us the freedom to actually explore our lineage. And it's so interesting, even going back to with my grandfather who came out to this area, being that I'm originally from New York and my parents were born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And it's interesting how things can come full circle because my family, the Harveys, they're actually from Townsend, Baltimore County. And through doing research similar to hers, of looking my family up, doing DNA, and just constantly research. That's how I was able to discover where my paternal family came from. And it's interesting that it's actually in this area and that I will be actually living back in this area today. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the area you're in now is in Maryland.
Yeah,
just
I'm in
for those
Maryland.
who don't know.
Yeah, but it's just interesting to be so
Yeah.
close.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing. So where did you trace your lineage all the way back to the continent? What region?
I
What
wasn't
part
able
of
to. It's
Africa?
just doing DNA that I was able to find out percentages, but not like an actual link like Tarika was able to. For me, the furthest I've been able to go back would be, actually I did both my maternal and paternal, but my paternal history, that was particularly the furthest back I was able to go with the actual picture, because I've never seen any pictures of my actual family. So that was really interesting to find out. I had a great grandfather who fought in the Civil War.
That's amazing. And pictures were rare then, so it's a huge deal when you're able to find
Well,
one.
like they took pictures, and as you could tell, like it's not like today. They took really regal, serious. It was a big affair, the whole family type deal.
Yeah, you got dressed up to get those pictures taken.
Sunday.
So can you share with us, Tarika and also Suraya, what importance is this legacy in modern day America? Because why is it important for an African American in today's world to look back and try to learn about this history? And what makes it important? How does it affect us?
It's vital, because if you go by stereotypical narratives, then you have created nothing, you've built nothing, you've done nothing, you come from nothing, you have no history, you have no legacy, all you did was pick cotton. So when you start researching your history and you gain an understanding to say, no, this is what my people have accomplished, this is the legacy of what we come from, what we built, who we are. And you learn little details about yourself that gives you a certain level of self-esteem, because at the end of the day, you get to learn the different skills. Like, for example, on my maternal side, I learned that my grandfather or my great-grandfather was a carpenter, which is really interesting because I'm very hands-on. I'm a very, jack of all trades and a master of none type of person. So when you start looking into the different trades and skills that your ancestors have, when you look at these census reports and they tell you the kind of jobs and type of things that they did, it lets you know to an extent also what you're capable of. And that's what this day represents also. Letting you know that your people, y'all were capable and able to do a great deal, and you have.
Nice. And you, Tarika? You're muted. You're muted, Tarika.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Get this filter that my daughter put on my phone off of. As much as I tried, these kids are amazingly talented. Maybe she'll be an actor.
Yes, they are.
It has a lot of significance. So I like Suraya. I come from Brooklyn, New York as well. And for me, I didn't hear a lot about Juneteenth, which is, I learned about slavery but I didn't necessarily make that connection to Juneteenth. And now that I'm living in Texas near Houston, it's such a big, huge deal here. And it has a lot of significance. The emancipation of African Americans has just a huge significance in this country's history, because, the institution of slavery was over 200 years. And similar to what Suraya was mentioning about understanding that, I think, unfortunately for African Americans, of course, there's a deep pain attached to slavery. And even when I used to teach my students about slavery, sometimes they didn't want to go into it. They didn't want to delve into it because it was too painful. Even the thought of it, the thought of your ancestors being enslaved is actually a lot to even think about or contemplate. The thought of what happened when your ancestors got here, but then before they got here as well, like what happened on the continent of Africa, what happened during the Middle Passage. It's all extremely painful. And going back to like the Frederick Douglass speech of the atrocities, it's really it really is a lot of atrocities associated with it. But then I go back to my feeling that how African Americans built this country, literally built this country, and no one can tell me different, and when we look at these buildings and these monuments, they were built with African labor. And that's really something important to note. And just as Suraya was mentioning, that a lot of times we're told as African Americans that we have made no historical contributions, when the fact of the matter is we've made significant historical contributions in this country. And it's not to say whose contributions are more, but I mean, anyone can tell you, if you were an employer and if your employees worked for free and you became a billionaire because of free labor, no one can say, you can't say, oh, well, they didn't make any contribution. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, literally, there was free labor for over 200 years in this country, which allowed this country to develop economically, and we are still, and now we're considered to be one of the world's richest countries. Like, it has a direct effect. The labor of African Americans has had a direct effect on the trajectory of this country. And so it's really important to recognize that history, and to recognize that as African Americans, that we're still continuing to make enormous strides in this country. When you look at someone like Frederick Douglass, who was enslaved and became a famous orator and was giving speeches around the world and was able to write books. And to me, this is part of the skills and the energy that African Americans have brought to this country, that despite the odds, that we still continue to produce intellectual thought. We, like, in any aspect, whether scientific, historical, written works, we've excelled in so many areas. And it's by the grace and mercy of Allah that we have been able to make strides, even despite being oppressed. It's a miraculous thing to me to have this happen. So I take a lot of, despite the struggles that we African Americans still continue to go through, I also see that we have so much to offer, and that we've already been giving so much of ourselves, right? But we have so much to offer, and I think it's important for the youth to understand how important they are, and the skills that they have, and the lineage that they have, whether they are African American, or if they are from, or if they're from the continent and don't necessarily have that particular connection. But we have so much to offer the world. The African continent is one of the richest continents on earth. And this is just like, whatever you want to find, you're going to find on the continent. And it's still the case to this day. Like, Allah has blessed the continent and blessed the people of the continent with enormous skill sets. And unfortunately, people have taken advantage of those skill sets and of those resources. But if we, as persons of African descent, don't have a clear understanding of who we are and what we can contribute and have contributed, then I think that will be a really bad situation for us to be in. And instead of looking at ourselves as there's something wrong with us, I think we shouldn't look at it that way at all. We have enormous skill sets, and other people have seen it and have exploited it. But if we don't understand how valuable we are, how intelligent we are, then to me, that's one of the greatest losses. And we can't see ourselves through the eyes of someone who has oppressed us. We just can't. We have to understand that we already bringing value to the table. And that's why we fought for emancipation, because we knew that, no, we're free people. And we come from rich heritage and rich culture. And that's how you fight. That's how you fight for freedom. because no, I don't deserve this treatment. I'm a human being. I bring much to the table and I deserve to be honored and respected. So many people have made contributions in this country of African descent and continue to make those contributions. And hopefully we can stand in the footsteps of those who came before us.
I would like to touch on something that you kind of alluded to, but for example, when it comes to the legacy, and like a lot of people have being complete and utterly clueless of how it contributes into today. So like, for example, let's look at something very simple. A lot of people probably don't know much about, like the GI Bill and the which was a part of the Great Deal, right? And basically what that was is where they gave soldiers coming from the World War I or World War II, basically incentives and loans to be able to buy housing. And they totally denied African Americans that opportunity. And people don't realize when you create policies like these, that's how you create these great wealth divides and wealth gaps, where you create the dynamics that this country is in now. And a lot of people don't understand the whole structure that we have laid out in this country was formed from that bill, where Black people could not move in, and they hoarded us into ghettos, which they created, because those things were created, and they created these systems. When you don't understand your history, you don't understand your legacy, you don't understand how we moved about. Like, for example, even if you take, for example, the Great Migration. The Great Migration happened after slavery, where you had a lot of African Americans who were freshly freed, and they were traveling around looking for work, family, and other things. And then you had a lot of people along with the Industrial Revolution, where you have a lot of people moving to the North to find jobs and work in factories. So like a lot of these things, like one thing pushes another. So with the freedom, and that's part of what started the Civil War also, because a lot of people don't talk about this fact. The North had slavery also. It just ended earlier. And when it ended earlier, it was only in the South. And the South was becoming very wealthy from having slaves, whereas the North had ended it. And that's why it was such a big problem, because then it's like, okay, how are we going to continue to allow the South to keep on growing? And then, they still needed people in the North for labor, and they just chose to get it elsewhere with more immigrants coming into the country. But all of this is a part of the fabric of what makes the United States.
Thank you so much for that addition, Suraya. Yes, it's mind-boggling. Something that Tarika mentioned earlier was just the issue of this history not being taught in school. It's not something new. We know that. We know that the history books and things like that does not touch on, or at least does not touch enough on the just the educating the younger generation about the history of the enslaved people in America. And even me as an adult going through grade school in America, I mean, it wasn't until my adulthood that I've done my research and try to understand that. So how else can we we can talk about like put this in the educational system. Tarika also mentioned something important like that I never really thought about, the fact that it's a painful chapter for a lot of young people to deal with. And I was like, oh, okay. That throws another issue in the mix. So how else can we as parents, aunties, uncles of the young ones, how can we teach them this history? And please don't say another enslaved movie or anything like that, but how can we really meaningfully teach them about this history so they can appreciate how far we've come and how much we have to offer? Because we definitely have a lot to offer.
I think it starts off with teaching your own family lineage. Because with that, I mean, okay, even for somebody who migrated here, it's still important because it still gives you a sense of self. And it for me, I know it always opened up that door of curiosity, of wanting to know who people are who were in your family, because it's called the silent generation, by the way. They were the original. They don't want that coming out of slavery. They don't want to talk about it. It was painful. They don't want to. They just didn't divulge. They didn't talk about it. Some of them did, maybe if you were lucky, but for the most part, they were called the silent generation for a reason, because they don't talk about it. So I think one of those key beginning points for us is to actually talk about it. You know, even as simple things. We don't even talk about our health. We don't talk about our health in this country. You have an aunt who passed away from a heart attack and you won't even know why. So we need to talk.
That is so key. And at the Afia Project, our tagline, what we aim to do is to build a legacy of health and wellness. We're trying to change that narrative. You're right. We can't even talk. We don't want to talk about issues of health. I literally just had an aunt, she's technically my cousin, pass away less than a week ago. We didn't know what was going on with her. She didn't tell anyone what was going on with her. We didn't know what was going on with her. Even when she went to the hospital, she was there for about 3 days or so before she passed away. We were just learning bits and pieces of what was going on. So I think we do need to change that that attitude, that way of being. I can understand the first generation of enslaved people where they were silent, as you call them, the silent generation. It was something painful. It was a coping skill. I totally get it. I get that. So I don't know. I guess it's for me. I'm more forgiving of that generation for being silent about things. But unfortunately, that means that the next generation doesn't know what happened. We start to forget as time goes on, and we're more likely to just accept whatever was fed into us, where now they're now defining us as just laborers, just people who are good for being directed to do things. We're not being acknowledged for our intellectual skills, because there were some very bright, very smart individuals back then, i.e. Frederick Douglass, and others, so many others, Ida Wells, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think one of it is breaking the silence, definitely. So how else do we plan to do this moving forward?
Well, I mean, another thing I would like to contribute to that is like, we have pathologies in our family, like, and a lot of times, a lot of people, we don't really analyze our pathologies, right? Like relationships, for one, how we communication, how we engage with each other. All of that plays a role in how, for example, even when we look at, let's take history, for example, just period. History is when you have a group of people who come together, who decide on a certain, like if you have an event and y'all decide to document it in a certain way. That is what's history. That is what people decide to remember, right? So with that being said, like, if we are not taking the time as people to decide what we want to acknowledge, what we want to make important. For example, even now, when we start talking about Texas, if we're going to look at schools and what's being taught in schools, we got to remember the same state that took 2.5 years to free African-American people is the same states that produces our textbooks, a lot of them. And then I think, I could be wrong, but from that same region, you have the Sisterhood of the Confederacy that created a whole narrative of what slavery and what happened in this country. And it's a narrative that benefited them and that excluded our portion as Black Americans in this country. So you're not going to get the truth if we continue to allow people to have these narratives and we don't push for our narrative that says that we were here.
Yeah, go ahead, Tariq. I see your hand up. Go ahead. Unmute yourself. Unmute.
Shukran for that. Yeah, I think it's a really great question. Like, what can we do as parents, as family members, as community members? And I feel like things have to start with yourself, right? Like, if you want some change to happen, like you have to start with being the instrument of the change that you want to see in the world. So one of the things that was helpful for me growing up is having books around. Yeah. My mother had so many books around for me to read, and I would just browse her books and I would just start reading books. And I know this generation is different or maybe wired a little bit differently, but I think every African-American child should know Black authors. And the thing is, especially if our children go to public school, but even in private school, how many Black authors are they reading? but how many Black authors are there? And that's the amazing part. So I just have a couple of books. For those who know me, they know that I love books. So I just have a couple of books that I have in my daughter's personal library. And part of it is, it's just like part of it is, even if she doesn't read the whole thing, I want her to look at those pictures. I want her to look at those images, because they have images of Prophet Isa, right? And those images are actually really powerful. So I like her to see images of Black people making contributions, right? So this is one called Young, Gifted, and Black. Just the title alone, right? It's a powerful messaging, young, gifted, and Black, right? So it's telling her like, oh, young, like, yeah, they're Black people. And then it's 52 of them, right? So it's not just, because a lot of times in the narratives, like they only hear about Black people during the shortest month of February, Black History Month, right? And they might only hear about Martin Luther King, the usual suspects, unfortunately, right? Martin Luther King or Harriet Tubman. But this one, meet 52 Black heroes from past, and that's just 52, right? Of course, there's a lot more than 52, right? So it's the messaging. It's what we're doing as community members, as parents. Here's another book that I like, Glory, Magical Visions of Black Beauty. And there are pictures of Africa, because my child is an African-American girl. And I want her to see depictions of African-American girls with natural hairstyles and different hairstyles. And actually, some of the girls are from the continent of Africa, as well as in the diaspora. And they tell their stories, their actual stories. So this was a book that I got my daughter for her birthday. Because I think instead of all the toys and the games, and they need some books. Let's be real. Let's have them have some books. And then it was already mentioned by you, Fauzia, but you mentioned already Ida B. Wells. So here's another book. Who was Ida B. Wells? And it's written at her grade level, because these are things that I didn't have as a child. There weren't so many resources where you had grade level books about famous African Americans who made several contributions. Another one, and so this is a fictional book, President of the Whole Fifth Grade. Once again, right, just in the image, even if she didn't crack it open, she knows there's a Black author. They wrote this book, President of the Whole Fifth Grade. Where's my daughter going to next year, inshallah? Fifth grade. Can she be president? Well, maybe president. I got that book, President of the Whole Fifth Grade. We're just planting the seeds, right? We're planting the seeds, but they need to know, I think it's really important that they need to know Black author. Here's another one, Mia Mayhem Learns to Fly, right? And so I'm very—
Those are all girl books, Tarika.
Well, I got a girl.
I got your son helping sister out.
But I just, those are just a few of the books in her library. I'm very intentional about, I try and be intentional about the shows that I have her watch. And I'm not saying by any means I'm perfect, right? And there is stuff that slips by, but I try and be intentional about what I let her watch, what I let her read, what she has access to, and let her know, because everything, I want her to feel affirmed. I want my daughter to feel affirmed. But first you have to feel affirmed yourself. That's why I say it always starts with you. Education starts with you. You have to know yourself. Okay, what are some of the famous African-American authors? Have I read them? Do I know anything about their work, about their life? And one of my favorite teachers, and I've had a lot of teachers because I have a PhD and I've had so much schooling. I've had many years of indoctrination. But one of my favorite teachers was from the 6th grade, and I'll never forget her. She assigned us all Black authors, and we read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings and Kaffir Boy by Mark Mathabane, which was about apartheid in South Africa. And we read The Bluest Eye. Now, these are like heavy books, but we were reading this in the 6th grade. And that in and of itself gave me so much in terms of filling my cup up, because it was the first time that I was assigned Black authors. And there is no reason why a child in the 6th grade is only first getting their hands on a book by a Black author.
Yeah.
There's just no reason.
Yeah. You mentioned something very important, Tarika, the fact that.
Can I interrupt you? Because
Go ahead.
Ask a question in the chat. What do y'all think about the term FBA? Okay, so that was founded by Tariq Nasheed. And his whole thing was wanting to separate and make a distinction between people who went through chattel slavery here in America and from people who immigrated over here. Okay, I do not subscribe to that. I prefer American Descendants of Slavery, because that is an actual movement that is moving us towards something that we need, which is reparations. And that's like much more, there's more education towards that politically with that movement than it is of FBA. So
yeah, I saw that question too. This is the first time I'm hearing or reading FBA, Foundation of Black Americans.
Yeah.
So I don't even have a formed opinion about that. And I'm also familiar with ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves.
They have a website also. I'll plug that in.
Sorry, say that again.
I said ADOS has a website that tells you what's the whole reasoning. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I feel it's really important because a lot of people don't understand what reparations is about. Yeah. So they have a reparations movement and along with the Black agenda. So the reparation movement is basically people who like myself, who come from the descendants of slavery and saying that this is why we are due. Going back into what I mentioned earlier about the Great New Deal with the GI Bill, where they created policies where they made us immune to wealth. So this is about giving reparations, not only for slavery, but from the many policies and things that they have created to deny us what we're due. And then along with the Black agenda. So I could put that in the chat if I.
No, absolutely. So I that's exactly how I know what I know of ADOS.
Oh, and one more thing. Tariq Nasheed is a hustler. Let's keep that a buck, because he's been called out on a lot of different things too. And that's why I don't really subscribe to that name. I prefer ADOS.
Well, I have something new to go research myself. Thanks. Also in the chat, someone has shared All Because You Matter, which is a picture of a beautiful Black boy on the cover. And what's this other one? Let's see, Crown, an ode to the fresh cut with it's a boy, a Black boy with a cute little cut. So thanks for those. And so you're right, Tarika, just we as parents, as adults need to know that our kids are looking at what we're doing and they're following in our footsteps, whether we like it or not. They typically do as they say, they do as what they see and not necessarily always what we say. So we have to be very, very vigilant about what it is we're consuming ourselves. I know on the more elementary level, when my kids watch cartoons, I want them to watch cartoons that represents them. Alhamdulillah, now there are more of those out. And this is not me necessarily promoting every child should sit in front of TV and watch TV all day long, but they do watch TV. And I just want to make sure that whatever they're watching, it's something that represents them. It's amazing now. I sit with them and I watch, I was like, wow, they got like the superhero and stuff. They have all these things we didn't have growing up, right? Other things is knowing what type of information they're consuming, because not everything that's online is good for them. I'm a huge fan of Brain Pop. I homeschool my kids and I supplement with Brain Pop. And I'm really blown by the way they present the materials to the kids. And it's amazing to me, because I've always had that guarded response, like, okay, let me see, what am I gonna be mad about today? What are they teaching to my kids, and how they're teaching American history or the history of African Americans in America? And I feel like Brain Pop has been my go-to when it comes to these things, just being able to present it in a more sensible manner, not the general ways that whitewashes everything else. And I know we're sharing things back and forth. I really appreciate that. There's some additional links. Okay, Suraya just shared the one on reparations. I guess that's tied to the American Descendants of Slaves. Okay, and you shared some more names. Another thing I wanted to say is, so for some kids who are not necessarily keen on always reading, audiobooks is also another thing. I'm a huge audiobooks fan, and my my favorite genre is a historical fiction, and that's how I really educate myself. And I know at least one of my kids is into audiobooks as well. So sometimes I'll have the physical book along with the audiobooks, and he'll follow along, and we'll have discussions and things like that. Like you said, Tarika, and things at their age level, at their level, you meet them where they are. You give them the information that they would be most in a way that they'll be most apt to receive it. And I also give my kids, I allow them the freedom to ask questions without judgment. They may not understand things, they may not know what things mean, and I want to always make sure that I present that myself to them in a way that makes it easy for them to ask questions, to question things, to ask for clarifications and things like that. I just wanted to put that out there. Did you want to say anything further, Suraya, about some of the things you're sharing with us?
I lost my train of
No,
thought.
someone just, Alia, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, says, I understand ADOs are being political, but it's such a chip, the slavery portion. Oh, because it says American descendants of slaves. I thought maybe they would have changed to American descendants of enslaved people, but I think that's. Okay.
I mean, I kind of get a little whatever about it too. Like, I don't, how do I put this?
No. I think wait. Ali, I think it's different. Relevant. Hold on. I'm looking at the comment. She says we don't hear Jews calling themselves descendants of Nazis. They would not call themselves descendants because they're not descendants of Nazis. The only issue that I might have is, now we are going through some times where we're moving away from saying slaves, as an identity, but people were enslaved. But I still think besides that, it's still very, it's a correct Holocaust. Oh, okay. Of Holocaust. Okay.
I mean, I could agree with that. I don't care 100% for the name. What I care more so, I guess, is for the movement and the people who founded it and what they're doing with it. Because I don't really care for the word slavery, but I still I don't care for FBA because it's just talk for me.
I might have to go research FBA.
Yeah. That's my biggest bone, because the founder of it, he's not really about anything.
Oh, okay.
And with the other group, they're about really educating people, and that's the biggest part. Like, biggest problem for Black Americans or ADOS or whatever you want to call us, the bottom line is we're not politically educated. And that's what they, like, for example, especially with Yvette Carnell, she does a lot to like really educate people on this political system and why we are in the condition that we are. Whereas Tariq, all he want to do is sit there and make comedy and basically get on people who migrated to this country and make them to be something of a nemesis to us or an opponent for us, when that's not the case. The truth of the matter is that we have our battle, and that people who come here who look like us get treated the same way. The difference is the legacy and what we're due.
That's interesting. Thanks for putting that in perspective. Inshallah, I plan to go look up FBA. Go ahead, Tarika.
I think this whole conversation is very interesting, and especially even as we talk about these labels, because labels matter, and what we call ourselves, it does matter, but also having an understanding of why we call ourselves what we call ourselves, and trying to have an understanding of where did the labels come from? Where did they come from, and who created them? And do we understand the history of the labels as well? So I think it's an important conversation. I like, as an educator, I like dialogue, and I like the fact that people aren't necessarily on the same exact page with what we should call ourselves, because I think it is complex and complicated. But I appreciate the different terminology and exploring that more, and even the different ways, just in my studies as a sociologist, the different ways that African Americans have been referred to in this country has changed, and it may change some more. We don't know. going from Negro on the census to colored to African American. It's changing. The definition is changing. So I find this dialogue interesting, and I just invite everyone, including myself, to just keep on learning and keep on studying and growing and learning more about our history, our shared history, and what we bring to the table. Because really, honestly, once we start, like, for example, there's a website called OutSchool. I don't know if you know about this website,
Yes,
but
I love
they
how
have
cool.
they have classes for youth and based on different age groups. So I signed my daughter up for an African Queens course, and just to me, it's just very beautiful for my daughter to learn about African queens at her age. I think it empowers her to know that African queens existed, because if she doesn't have that understanding, she might think that the only queens are like Queen Elizabeth and people that look like her, right? When there were, way before Queen Elizabeth got started, right, there were African queens. So we have a rich heritage that we should be proud of and happy of. We shouldn't feel any, oh my goodness, I feel happy. I'm like, look at the contributions of my people. It just makes me, honestly, it makes me happy seeing Black people, seeing all the contribution. It makes me happy. And I understand that there are issues and problems and things that we need to do better, but we also bring so much to the table that we don't even acknowledge. We just don't acknowledge it at all. And we have to learn more about it so that we can spread that information. And I just saw a clip about a African American man who developed a device to create to get water from air. I mean, it was just the most, it's like, wow, what a smart idea. And he created this huge machine, and I think he said he had created the machine, and now it's in use in different countries and things like that. But we need to know about this stuff. We are innovators, we are creators. Even for our children, if they see stories that don't look like them, they can create the stories. Because like you were saying, Fauzia, these stories, these books like this, these fictional books weren't around like this when we were younger. I didn't see any book like this of an African American child on a book, right? Having a fictional tale about her, just one book about one Black character, one strong Black lead character. So what happens? So our children, let them be the creators, let them create the stories that they want to see. And that's what what AFIA is about to me. It's about like the education, right? And letting the community life, and letting us know that we can engage. We have much to offer. We have much to offer and much to do as well. And our kids, they're going to be leading the torch, right? We're going to pass the torch to them. And we want to make sure that they feel grounded and feel like, I can do this. I can write my stories, that if I don't see it, if I don't like this, I'm like, okay, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to create something different? Yeah. And I'm sure there's some stories out there. There's so many more stories that need to be told.
Thank you so much. That is so key. Yes, we need to.
Can I say something about names though?
Say it again.
I said, can I say something about names though?
Okay.
Okay, like, so Islamically, we know like one of the rights of a child is that you give them a good name, right? But that just tells you something about Black people, because we will fight over our name. Like, I mean, the most important part is what we're doing, but we will fight about a name. And that ain't the most important thing. And at the end of the day, it's about what we want to do for our people, how we call, because even the name ADOS, or American Descendant of Slavery, America is this whole continent. You got South America. So, I mean, you can make so many arguments on so many different levels when you start breaking down names. The important part is, are we going to move as collectives, as people, to do things that's in our collective interest?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that to me is what the most important part.
The mission of the group, whatever you name
Exactly.
yourself, the mission,
Mhm.
your objectives, what it is you're doing to better for the betterment of the people.
Exactly.
One
That's our
last thing I was going to add before we wrap up. Sorry, say it again, Suraya.
I said that's the next real war for us. Is really is get, because we had emancipation, but we haven't done. I mean, you had the civil rights movement, but after that, we haven't done much by way of really obtaining. Even that is problematic because the wording in that makes it where everybody else benefits it, but the people it was intended for. But for the most part, that is the next movement, is that Black people do get reparations, and then we do have laws that protect people, Black people, because I'm not going to say people of color, Black people.
A couple of months ago, I posted something. I can't remember what state it is that they had started that process. I can't remember which state. I don't want to mention a state, but they had started the process, and I put something. I was like, "Y'all Africans, please let African Americans have their time. Don't try to."
Well, see,
it was a joke, but I was serious.
No, it's a joke. But with you saying that, with the FBA, he will jump on you for that, especially because you're Nigerian. So, like, look up. Yes, he will jump on you that because you're the person, quote unquote, coming over here and reaping all the benefits for what our people, quote unquote, fought for.
Yeah, I mean, there are discussions where I know I have to be quiet because I can't have a say in it because I'm not an African descendant of an enslaved person in this country. However, I think it'll be very close-minded for us to think that that means every African or everyone who is not of an enslaved history has nothing to contribute. I think that's where we begin to lose people. That's where we begin to make mistakes and go the wrong way, because I'm all about what can I do to help, and I also want to know when to step back and let folks who are more qualified and better at doing it to take over and do what needs to be done.
And that's the best attitude to have, because that's how you work together to reach common goals.
Yeah. So one last thing I wanted to throw out there: travel. Get, expose these kids to all types of experiences. One of the biggest joy for me was, I'm Muslim, of course, so definitely I wanted my kids, especially because I have boys, I wanted them to see that there are countries that are run by Muslims. So we did a little spiel of traveling around the Muslim world. They're not 100%, and I try to remind them, America's not 100% either, okay? So don't act like democracy in America is perfect. So I wanted them to see, and also I wanted them to see a country that's run by Black people. So we went to Nigeria, and I always pointed out, Black people are the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, the president, the grass cutter, the homekeeper, the this and that. We're everywhere, because I didn't want them to get pigeonholed to thinking, oh, only certain people do certain types of tasks. I've had one of my youngest question me one time about Hispanics, and he was getting to the point where he was thinking Hispanics were the only ones who did the construction work. I was like, no, sweetheart, it just happens to be a job that this person is holding. But think about that Hispanic person's country of origin. Hispanics were doing every kind of work in that country, right? We have to be able to nip it at the bud and address it right away because these are things that they're exposed to. They're gonna come from their own understanding based on what they see, and it's up to us to try to correct it as much as possible, or at least, like I said, give them permission to question what they're seeing, so they're not just consuming everything. So yes, travel, talk through things. And with that said, any last thoughts, any closing remarks before we close this out, because this is now 1:04. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Any closing remarks, Suraya, Tarika?
Happy Jubilee.
Happy Jubilee. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you for holding this forum. That's my remark. Thank you for
alhamdulillah.
It's really important, and I hope that even though the attendance was low, that hopefully other people will see the video and it can reach more people, and just to keep the conversation going. We're continuously learning and growing, and thank you for having this forum so that we can talk about Juneteenth, because we need to cure the ignorance about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope we can do this on an annual basis. I'd love for more in-person activities. So what we did just this year was just promote things that were going on in the community, encourage folks to attend, and just reserve this 1 hour for us to be able to talk, have these conversations. And I think this is pretty good. Maybe we'll have more of a bigger town hall meeting type of style discussions in the coming year, inshallah. Like it's a conversation I don't want to stop here. I have a feeling that issues of reparation will be something to really start to discuss, what we see, how we see that going, and it looks like it's going to come up, inshallah, in the next year, especially now that Juneteenth is finally recognized as a federal holiday. So we're at that so what moment, like, so what? Now you recognize it. Now, what are you going to do about it to really mark its significance and show Americans, show African Americans, show the world that it's something that you care about? So yeah, that's why I'm hoping we see this go. So thank you all so much once again. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for tuning in. This is going to be saved on Facebook, so you can always access it that way, and I'll put it up on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you all so much, much. Thanks to Suraya and Tarika for participating in this, and everyone else for tuning in. Take care, everyone. Happy Juneteenth. Assalamu alaikum.